MTIP amendments to be able to advance to construction. Next slide. So specifically on the slide you see in front of you, this is the funded phase. This is also the subject of the MTIP amendments that we are requesting. The replacement of the bridges, the connections to I-5, SR-14, and Hayden Island. Again, the shared use path and the width for light rail on the bridge, and removal of the existing bridges. Pre-completion tolling is included in these costs, as well as that transit design to move from 30% to 60% to stay within the capital investment grant pipeline. Total costs for this are $5.68 billion. And I think on the next slide, the funds that we have available for the program is seen in the black line here. First, you see, and above that is the $2.1 billion in federal funds from the MEGA and the Bridge Investment Grant Program. You see the billion from each of the states, Washington on 2 lines, Oregon on 1 line. So that's an additional $2 billion. There's some previous state funding. And then the projected toll funding amount is the item that's been increased since March from 1.25 to 1.5 billion. So we do have to manage with that black line of funds available to the costs that we identify. So the funds available on this shows 5.69, which is just above that 5.68 figure. Again, we are showing below that line the continued work to advance the capital investment grant program process to support the construction of light rail and some additional funds that have been identified in Washington and also with the federal government. Next slide. There's also been the update in program schedule. This has not changed since we last presented to you, but just as a highlight, one, we do have the final supplemental environmental impact statement, which has been issued. That is necessary to get to the issuance of the NEPA record of decision. Also needed for the NEPA record of decision is this fiscal constraint process that we are working on with you folks right now. We are looking to advance to construction. So what you see on this slide for this year is working to get the request for qualifications and proposals out this year, and then being able to select a contractor and begin that contract award and negotiations work next year, supporting advancement to construction in 2028. We look to see toll commencement occurring at the same time as construction starting. That is both a federal expectation, but also, again, a public expectation to see the work that you're supporting. We are targeting a full funding grant agreement with the capital investment grant program process in 2030. It does take 6 to 7 years. We anticipate to complete the replacement bridge itself, get it connected and have it be usable to folks, but that's going to be in dialogue with the contractor to settle that schedule. With this schedule, pending additional funding, light rail transit could be in service in 2036. Next slide. So specific to what your role is and what we're seeking, it's very important for the federal government to see these demonstrations of fiscal constraint. Without it, they will not issue the record of decision. So that is the MTIP and STIP process that we're going through now. We've had a RTAC vote in Washington already that feeds into the RTC board. And then the Oregon Transportation Commission again adopted the state transportation improvement plan this morning in a special meeting. So we're working through this process to get these completed. We need them done by the end of July so that we can get that record of decision. Getting the record of decision unlocks additional levels of review within the federal government for the BIP and MEGA grant obligation amendment agreements that are needed. We have to have those complete by the end of September, or there is the risk of losing $546 million that was obligated under funds that expire at the end of September. All of those things are critical to construction. We cannot go to construction without having the funds in hand and ready to go for issuing the request for proposals and starting that process. So both it is critical for our NEPA process for an action from you folks, as well as it's critical to getting to construction on the bridge. Next slide. So this slide just tries to summarize in a little bit of a chart fashion what we've seen from March until now. So that core set of projects, that is what we came out with in March, and then the step 1, and then basically demonstrating the combining of packages. So at this point, we have a combined package for the bridge, the approaches, SR-14 Hayden Island, plus also bridge removal. So that's one package, and then separate packages and separate line items within the MTIP for pre-completion tolling and transit design. Next slide. So specifically, we are looking to increase funds in 3 existing line items in the MTIP. There's the first one that is a program management activity. There is work in here to fund right-of-way acquisitions and utility relocations, as well as ongoing program support for the overall 5-mile program. The second line item here is specific to the bridge construction and all of those associated contracts. That will include the adequate width for light rail and also includes the removal of the existing interstate bridge. The third one that will be increased is the pre-completion tolling line item. That will include both the infrastructure as well as back office adjustments and all of the work with the public that's needed to launch tolling in a new market. And finally, we are seeking to add a new project to the MTIP, so that is the transit design. Again, very critical to staying in the capital investment grant program process so we can continue to seek that $1 billion in funding. Next slide. We are very excited about the opportunity to advance a bridge contract this year. It has been decades in the making. The game plan at this time is for Washington State DOT to take the lead on that contract activity. They have experience in progressive design build. We are working to make adjustments inside the program team to ready for construction and be ready specifically for this style of procurement, which has a dynamic interface between the project, the owner of the program, as well as the contractor. And so you make dynamic decisions over the course of years with them to figure out how you can start things while you're finishing final design and identifying betterments or cost savings dynamically with them. Again, you see the intention to do qualifications and proposal this year and select a contractor next year. There are innovations available through this tool because of that dynamic conversation. There are also efficiencies and the opportunity for early construction as we are finishing final design on other pieces. So there's the opportunity to get out early based on their kind of capacity and understanding about how to do the work. There's also the expectation to reduce kind of change orders and claims based on a dynamic and robust conversation about risk sharing that occurs as you are working with them getting to that 2028 construction start. Next slide. I think that's the end of my presentation, and I don't know what the preference is, if we want to do Gabriella's and then do questions, or how you want to proceed.
Let's move on presentations.
Okay. Good morning, Gabriela Lopez. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a senior transportation planner at Metro, and I'm going to be presenting the proposed amendments and how they would impact the MTIP. Next slide, please. So just as a quick overview, there's no approval recommendation today. We are doing a two-touch approach with an action anticipated to happen at the June 23rd council meeting. And included in your meeting packet is the staff report's draft resolution, Exhibit A, which is the programming tables of the current MTIP and the proposed amendment, Exhibit B, which is a placeholder for our public comment period summary, a staff memo on the major project assessment for the IBR program, modified local preferred alternative, and projects map for the amendment. Next slide, please. The formal amendment consists of 3 existing IBR program projects, which are being changed, the funding or the scope and description, and also the adding of a new project, as Carly mentioned, which is for the transit design. Next slide. The total increase for across the 4 projects would be an increase of $3.6 billion to the MTIP. So I'm now going to go through each of the projects and what the changes are. The first project is for the non-construction activities that include design, right-of-way, and utility relocation. This project is being changed to change the project description to now include right-of-way acquisition of demolition for the current bridge infrastructure. And the proposed amendment would increase the funding from $554 million to $793 million. This is done through an increase in the preliminary engineering phase of $300 million, increasing the utility relocation phase by $26 million, and a decrease in the right-of-way phase of $86 million. Next slide. Next project is to advance post-NEPA design and construction activities for the bridge replacement, as well as the design and construction for the removal of the existing structure. The changes in project description would be to reflect that removal of the existing structure. We would also be updating the milepost for the project location to match the design project, as well as increasing the PE phase by 233 million and the construction phase by approximately $3 billion. This would be a total project increase going from 1.4 billion to 4.7 billion funding. Next slide. And the third project that is already existing in the MTIP that would be amended would be the I-5 pre-completion tolling project. This project would be increasing from 24 million to 51 million with a change in the project name and project description. This is to make sure that we include pre-launch activities such as education, marketing, system integration, and customer service activities. We would also be updating the milepost to reflect the accurate project location and increasing the construction phase by 1 million and the other phase by 25 million. Next slide. And the fourth project included in the amendment would be a new project to be added to the MTIP. As Carly mentioned, this would be to advance the transit design and to complete 60% of design for light rail. This would be a preliminary engineering phase project with 50 million of Washington DOT mega grant funds. Next slide. A major project assessment was developed for this amendment. This is done when a project has either capacity enhancing, is regionally significant, or has an amendment that is over $100 million. And this documents how the proposed amendment will perform in accordance with local, regional, and state transportation policies, as well as evaluate how it's going to address the 5 goal areas of the 2023 Regional Transportation Plan. Since the IBR program amendment is not proposing any changes to the full build of the project, the analysis results remain the same as what was presented in the July 2025 formal amendment. Next slide. This is an overview of the amendment processing and approval timeline. We did start the 30-day public comment period on April 27, 2026. It initially was set to conclude on May 27, 2026, but this did change due to a change in the amendment information that we received on May 18. So it was added an additional 30 days, which will now mean the public comment period would conclude June 16, 2026. The amendment overview was presented to TPAC on May 1st and JPAC on May 21st. We are here now at Metro Council to present the overview as well. And TPAC action would be anticipated June 5th, with JPAC also on taking action June 18 and Metro Council on June 23rd. Next slide. And again, just as a reminder, this would be a two-touch approach with Metro Council to consider action on June 23rd, 2026 meeting.
Okay. Thank you very much for your presentations. We'll open it up for questions. Colleagues. Really, no questions? Oh,
I raised my hand.
all right. Councilor Gonzalez.
Waiting. Great. Thank you for coming, Carly and Metro team. We've had the opportunity to talk at length about this project, so I appreciate you coming again, and obviously it's a really important milestone. And I have one question that I think that you've talked about over the last few months, but I want to ask it again, just to make sure that as we approach this really important vote, that I have the confidence that I need that we're gonna build a project that serves the people and the Oregonians and the workers and the firms that we want to support. So one of the things that this administration has been very public, and same with US DOTs, there's been a war on DEI and initiatives that could support community and community improvements. I think things that this region values and believes in as well through our programs. So I would love to hear from you. You know, how is WashDOT and ODOT going to work to make sure that, you know, Oregonians and firms have an opportunity to apply for work, to work on this project in a way that not just builds the project, but also helps to address some of our economic disparities and create kind of that intentional prosperity?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councilmember Gonzalez. So I think one, it's important to note that Washington state law does require 15% apprenticeship of labor hours. So that is a component of the program as just a mechanism of Washington state law. Also, the intention is to have a small business program on the contract with, goals and that type of thing that one has typically seen around a disadvantaged business enterprise style of program. In Washington state, we see that basically, I think most, if not all, DBE registered businesses are also small businesses and qualify. So that presents that opportunity. The other reality is I think we need as much support from the community about getting people ready for this body of work as is possible, recognizing that in key years of construction, we're going to outstrip the capacity of the workforce here, the capacity of businesses here. So recognizing that it's, I think it's beyond what we have locally anyway. I think the other piece is just recognizing that Oregon and Washington are going to work together on the contracting activity. The progressive design build tool does allow for and actually requires subcontracting of about, I think, 70% of the value of the contract. And so that is, and the subcontracting activity is something that can be dynamically engaged with the contractor. So it's not their sole and exclusive decision-making, that the states have a role in helping to select and identify those subcontractors. So there's lots of opportunity there. And I know we're working with both states to make sure that there's clarity for Oregon businesses about, sort of how current certifications work or how they can get certified in Washington to be eligible.
Thanks, Carly. Yeah, I appreciate your leadership and WashDOT's leadership on the project. And as Oregonians, and half the project is Oregon, I want to make sure that Oregon companies and Oregon workers have the opportunity to benefit from this. So it's very important to me to hear that from you. Another question, if I could ask here really quickly, something that I've heard a lot about from people is concern about major projects, not just in Oregon and Washington, but across the country that continue to grow in budget, to be delayed, and people have expressed to me a lot of concerns about cost overruns, delivery, and I always want to remind people that we're capable of building and delivering things. So I would love to hear from you. What mechanisms do you have in place to make sure that, to the best of our ability, we meet this project on time and on budget? And kind of second to that is, how are you going to engage with the Metro Councilor, with people around, if in any instance there are overruns or there are major changes that could cause a crisis in confidence, or worries about the project's feasibility going forward?
Certainly. So I think one is, we have an estimate right now that is added, has significant risk built into it, and also an increased inflation rate. So there is, sort of additional conservatism that is built into the estimate. I think that is much more durable in the near term years than it is in the out term years, especially when we don't have all the funding for the full 5 miles. And so that outer body of work is an open question about, when do folks have priorities for seeing those improvements come forward, and how do they want to talk about funding? Specific to this body of work, though, we are anticipating sort of rich oversight within the DOTs and their delegated responsibility from Oregon Transportation Commission, as well as legislature in Oregon, just basically legislature in Washington state. And also that dialogue needs to be rich and open with our project partners, which includes Metro, and making sure that folks are understanding that dialogue as we're having it. The other piece is just recognizing during that progressive design build process, before we get to the guaranteed maximum price, which is anticipated sort of in that 2028 timeframe, which allows that sort of big body of construction to advance forward. There's a lot of dialogue that happens before that can both increase or decrease costs. And so I think the other thing, which we heard from OTC this morning, and we hear from many folks, is that we need to manage within these funds to deliver what we're talking about delivering and understand what that means. So I think of that as a clear call, and also is only deliverable sort of on this time frame that we're talking about today. And so the reality of delay can change costs, but I think on the time frame that we're on, managing those activities to schedule, and also, you know, as we see changes to the program, making sure we're doing updates to estimates so that we are having that clear understanding. So the intention is to have that dialogue. The other reality is we anticipate coming back to the MTIP STIP process for amendments likely every year as monies sort of, you know, shift and adjust, and we understand what the demands are there. So I think there's also, this is not maybe the best process for having that rich dialogue, but it is a step in the process.
Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you so much. Really appreciate that you're here today and that you were able to join us at JPAC, and you've been very available so that we can all get up to speed on where the project is. For me, I've heard loud and clear concerns about the work itself, the construction, as well as the future tolling of the Interstate Bridge, causing diversion to the 205 and the Glen Jackson Bridge. Everybody has revisited the idea of tolling that 205 Glen Jackson Bridge so that there's equal incentive to take the other route. And I'm curious if you could just kind of update us on the two parts of the question there. One, the ability to toll Glen Jackson for whatever purpose, and two, what is being done to consider the decade of construction and diversion that will be cost.
So with respect to I-205 tolling, it's important to recognize, at least within Washington State, that the jurisdiction that gets to identify toll facilities is Washington State Legislature. In their action to approve I-5 tolling, they did specifically note that 205 tolling is not covered in that, so is not allowed. I think that one could take that as a permanent disallowance. I do think it is notable in context of I-5 bridge body of work that they noted that I-205 was not a component of that. So I'd say that's the Washington state law right now, and any kind of change to that would need to run through Washington Legislature as well as the Oregon Transportation Commission as an embodying entity to approve toll facilities. So that's the basic status on 205. With respect to construction, I know there are some impacts that are discussed in the final supplemental environmental impact statement. And also, I think as we understand more in dialogue with Progressive Design Builder, that's going to give us more rich information about what is that going to look like. Obviously, clear, consistent communication with folks to understand what to expect, and building on making sure that we are adhering to those timeframes, you know, have like something closed for a certain amount of time, and making sure that we're really doing a good job with meeting those timeframes so folks can feel like they can expect to see what we are telling them in advance. So I think that body of work is going to unfold as we have the Progressive Design Builder on board, and also then monitoring conditions that are out there and seeing if there are other things that we need to respond to. So I think it's going to be dynamic over the course of construction and a dialogue with the public.
Okay, great, thank you. I'd also like to speak a little bit to the light rail. I think it's really important to recognize that this region has advanced itself as a leader in public transportation because of our early and smart investment in our light rail system. We've been resting on our laurels. The last thing we did was double track the red. That's cool, but it doesn't put a new destination. It doesn't serve more people. And this is a real opportunity to do that where we've otherwise failed in the past decade. So looking at the advancement of light rail, obviously this portion of funding that we're doing the amendment for does include planning. Can you describe the scope of that planning a little bit?
So specifically, that is looking to create an advanced design for the grade separation at Marine Drive, the bridge over North Portland Harbor, the structure and station over Hayden Island, the connection up to the bridge itself. So advancing all of that design from 30% to 60%, as well as the design on the Washington side off of the bridge and the waterfront station. So that body of work plus track and systems. So that's, once you have that entire transit bed as the parallel to road bed down, then you also need to design the track and systems body of work to put on top of that. So it is advancing all of those activities so that we have that ready to go, which will inform both the full funding grant agreement process, but also sort of the risk assessment and any better understandings about costs that come along with that. So we do a risk assessment that is FTA standard, but they also conduct that. And so that can have bearing on costs for that program and what folks are expecting out of it.
And with your waterfront design, with your design of the station at Waterfront Vancouver, are at the 60% level, are you looking at that as a terminus, or would it change design too much to open it up for that to be stop one of two on the Vancouver side?
So there will be, I believe that the sort of turnaround concept there is some extension of track that goes beyond waterfront. And that will be important to understand where things are going from waterfront up to Evergreen. So it's not designed as a terminus, although it needs to have that turnaround capacity, and that turnaround capacity would be intended to be on the alignment up to Evergreen. I think folks are interested in having conversations about what that alignment looks like, which we can certainly do later this year. So that will be important to factor in for where that tail track goes.
But if our ultimate destination is Evergreen, why would we do turnaround at Waterfront?
Because I think you need that space for functionality at Waterfront until.
You're not gonna get it at Evergreen.
No, there'll be a different component for that turnaround at Evergreen. It's a different style, but until you have it in, you need that functionality between, as it is, if it is operating on its own for a while, it needs to be functional. And so you need that turnaround built in. And again, it is going to be tail track that eventually would be the track to Evergreen anyway. So it will not be, I don't believe it is throwaway work. I think it is basically sort of building a component of that forward so that you have the turnaround capacity, but that can also just be used as the track going forward once we're advancing to Evergreen.
Okay, I continue to ruminate. I don't want to let people believe that we're just going to let them off at the side of the water, as lovely as it is. We've got to get them up to Evergreen. Thank you.
Councilor Rosenthal.
Thank you, Interim Chair. First of all, thank you for coming. As Councilor Lewis said, thank you for being so available. I've heard your presentation and you're answering questions for several times now. It's sort of like it's almost getting to be every week. So appreciate your availability and willingness to talk about it. And I have to comment on Councilor Gonzalez's comment about the DEI. One of the things we realize, and one of the benefits of this project, if it moves forward, is that it's going to provide construction work for thousands of workers for virtually a lifetime, 10, 20 years, something like that. So how we get it right with DEI particularly is very important. I consider these basic principles. I do not consider the rhetoric that the current administration uses to denigrate them as basic principles to be at all relevant or at all honest. So how we get this right, and I think we're going to have to be very, very careful moving forward to make sure that the small minority or the small contractor thing actually does spread the wealth or spread the labor to not just specific small contractors, but to a much broader variety so that it benefits all the communities in the area. That is not guaranteed at this current point. So I think that that's very important. But I want to ask one question. In your first, I could ask a lot of questions, but I'll just limit it with one. And your first slide, and I do this mostly for public, just for public answering. One of the goals was to provide better access and to keep things flowing for the traveling public and commerce. How does removing the old bridge at this time serve that goal?
So
what is that specific cost? But it's about $500 million, I believe.
So the specific cost for removing the bridges itself is $390.3 million. So
Okay.
that's the delta. Yeah, that's the amount. It's contained in the 5.68 billion figure that we're looking to program in the MTIP. Specifically removing the bridges is one, a permit, it will be a permit requirement of replacing the existing bridges. The piers in the water for the new bridge and the old bridges do not align around the channels, and there's readjustment of the shipping channels in the river, and those need to be opened in the long run so that the river traffic can use them. So there is a necessity simply based on the water traffic of needing to remove those existing bridges. So that's one component. Quite plainly, also, the other component is just related to how and where the replacement bridge is and how it connects in. There's not really a system way to keep the existing bridges there and operational in a functional way connected to network without significant other investments. And also, again, as a permitting requirement, we cannot keep them in place because it would not allow for river traffic in a safe manner.
Thank you.
Councilor Simpson.
Thank you, Acting President Wong. Thank you, Carly. We've been doing this dance now for a few years. I really appreciate your availability and thank you again for leading this. Just real quick, and I really want to uplift my colleagues' comments about workforce and DEI and making sure that we fill in the blanks. We do have a construction careers pathway program here too, so it'd be great to connect with that. In terms of the pedestrian access and cycling access, could you speak a bit more about that piece? And then when we talk about the demolition of the old bridge, could you talk a little bit about how if there's a plan of how we get rid of the old pieces or portions of the bridge and how we can support small businesses in helping us to do that or remediate that?
Yeah. So bicycle and pedestrian access or other mobility use device users will have a shared use path on the bridge, and the new bridge will be connected to Hayden Island. At Hayden Island, it will connect into existing facilities. So the pathway that's over the North Portland Harbor right now, so you connect via sort of local streets and other networks to get onto that existing path between Hayden Island and mainland Oregon. And on the Washington side, the connection would be down to the Vancouver waterfront. We know there's interest in possibly connection between that ramp down from the bridge into the light rail station itself, for the opportunity to possibly co-use elevators there. That is something that we need to sort of retain in our awareness and think about going forward and sort of reserve the space for that to become possible. It seems like it's something that is likely viable, but again, without having folks on board at this time, the sort of certainty of guaranteeing that is not solid, but it's something that we understand as an interest to try to figure out how to design that right so it sort of lands and is at a right level where it could connect into those facilities in the future when they're coming forward. That will then connect into the facilities that are on the Washington side, so you can then go over through Old Apple Tree Park to the land bridge that's there to get up into Fort Vancouver. You can also continue into downtown Vancouver itself, or along the waterfront if you're doing the I-5 205 loop like some people like to do. So that's the basic gist of those improvements. With respect to demolition, because it is a historic structure, we do look to advertise if anybody wants to take a piece of it or take all of it. We've had that be successful in a couple times. There's, I think, one example that was highlighted in a IBR newsletter back in November. It's not super common because it is hard to ship and haul these big facilities, and where are you going to put them and what does that actually mean? I think you get a lot of early interest because people think it's cool, and then they start to think about the logistics of moving it, and it's challenging. So that's one opportunity, and we do look to do that for historic structures first. And then there's also the activity of making sure we're recycling as much of it as possible and putting it back to use. And so seeing whether or not there are ways to do that in kind of large chunks, or if that just is get down to the component pieces of the bridge and being able to do that. So that will be covered under the progressive design build contract. And so that dialogue around recycling or reuse of it will be within that contractual mechanism.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilor Ronson, did you have another question?
Actually, most of my questions have been asked already, and I want to align myself with the comments that have made about a workforce that mirrors the population in this metropolitan region. But as we think of moving forward on how we deal with the sequencing of this, what are we leaving out of this first round or this first section that creates the highest risk of completion? By which I mean, are we excluding from the project portion A or whatever
Yeah.
you're calling it there, any component that could create an obstacle in phase 2 or phase 3 to completion of the entire project?
So certainly we are trying to avoid that, which
Yeah.
is the obvious answer. But also I would note that what seems important to the program has always been starting at the river and building out from there. And so most important, which is central to the bridge itself and replacement of it, is making sure that it has all of the modes on it that people have identified as critical to the program. And so making sure that there is that space for LRT on the bridge is fundamentally critical. If you look at the yellow line and where it ends at Expo Center, even if there had been interest in going to Hayden Island, the idea of tacking on another bridge onto the end of that project and getting it to Hayden Island at that time would have been significantly cost prohibitive. So I think the space of really understanding how do you have that bridge space that is viable and available.
Local
for folks.
bridge?
I'm talking about when the yellow line was constructed originally, that would have been prohibitive. In this first step, we're making sure that the bridge over the main channel of the Columbia River has that space on it because it is the most costly item that we have, and making sure that we build it right so that it is creating space for that over time is important and essential.
So it's right of way and substructure.
You will have 34 feet of width on the southbound bridge that is available for light rail once it is connected on both sides.
Right.
So you're creating both, not just the substructure, but actually sort of the transit bed, for lack of a better term. So you'll
Okay.
have basically the concrete that then you can later put the tracking systems on, an appropriate barrier between the highway and that space, and an appropriate edge to that space, all those things, so that it is ready for tracking systems to go on top of it.
Okay.
To me, that is the most critical piece of making sure that it is there and available as the rest of that body of work comes forward. We are working to pay attention to forward compatibility in general. Most of the focused improvements at SR 14 and at Hayden Island do consider they are part of like either a first set of construction concept phases anyway, so they'd be a pathway you would have to walk through to complete the body of work in the long run. So on Hayden Island, there's actually an offset between the highway and where it gets down to the street, because you would anticipate retaining space in that area for the light rails that comes alongside the highway. So just trying to make sure that we are, as much as possible, even in this very focused first body of work, paying attention to where do things need to go and how do we transition to them over time.
I appreciate that. And I think Councilor Lewis has made comments that reference this, but I want to really underscore this council has been very clear on its commitment to light rail in this project.
Yep.
And we appreciate and expect you to continue your efforts to not leave that as we'll just lop that off piece to save money. I'm being a little curt in that, but we have everyone on this council and previous members, and I appreciate and just want to let you know, we'll continue to expect your entire team to look out for that.
Yeah, absolutely. The modified locally preferred alternative was specific to light
Yep.
rail,
Yep.
and it is a charge of the program, and we will work hard on it. We will need partners to help find the funding.
I'm
and bring
counting on
forward.
that. I
Yeah,
just want that to be
absolutely.
part of the conversation every single time.
Yep.
And Mr. Chair, if I might, one more, getting back to the workforce, and not just the workforce, but the organizations, the companies that will build this project. As has been referenced, the federal administration is hostile to this in ways that are unfathomable. clearly we have to be careful about anything that is or could be described as quotas or tilting the balance. But I'd like to hear more about what your plans are for including in conversations, in planning, in notices, in outreach, businesses that are owned by women, owned by people of color, owned by other groups that have been left out of the benefits. Because that's the way we're going to succeed with this. We're going to be in touch with them, nurturing them all along the way. And I just want to hear you tell us about what you're planning.
Yeah. So I think what would be important to note is that folks are already working on these things. So we do have a portal that's set up for, I think there's 3,500 businesses registered in that portal that's specific to IBR. We did just push information out to that list of an industry event that we're planning on the 4th of June. So that's specific to businesses, which is an opportunity to hear about the request for qualifications before it is issued. And is anticipated to be an opportunity for some of those primes who've been expressing interest to meet and engage with small businesses. So that's just one of many activities. I know that we regularly engage with those support groups in the area here. So AWAMI, BDI, those types of entities that are business support and have been working with both Apex accelerators in both Oregon and Washington to host supporting events, to coach and mentor businesses about a variety of things to get them up to speed. So those things have all been ongoing and recurring, and we anticipate those activities going forward. And to anticipate other industry events that'll be out there to, again, connect the contractors with small businesses. So that's all kind of ongoing work. We have folks who are embedded within the team who do that work.
Thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. I hope that that extends to including investments in business training, skill training that would advance the capacity of the target groups to participate fully in the contracts.
Yeah, and I can't speak to the specific topics that the Apex groups have done training on, but I do know they were in the office last week doing a specific targeted training that I think is about supporting and mentoring businesses. So certainly we can pull some of those topics if it's of interest.
I think I had heard conversations about a work group looking at a community benefit agreement. Can you speak a little bit more about where that's headed and like any sort of elements that are being discussed in the CBA?
So the Community Benefits Advisory Group met for a couple of years. I think it sunsetted in December or earlier. I was part of that group. I can't quite remember exactly the sunset date. And what came about as at the end of that was a set of recommendations from that group that was going to be taken back by the program team to analyze like how and where those things could be implemented. Some of the ideas were really well outside of what DOTs can implement. And so recognizing that we could be supportive of some of those activities like low-income housing, just generically, and like trying to support those things. So there's things that are outside of the wheelhouse of the DOTs. So running through that list of items and determining, how and where they could come to fruition within the program. So some of those things are anticipated to be that can be built into the contract itself. Some of the things are really kind of focusing in on things that the DOTs do already, but folks maybe don't appreciate or understand that we do. And so there's a variety of different places. One is working to put things in the request for proposals, but making sure that we know where those things will land. So that work is ongoing about identifying exactly where those things can land. There'll be a report that comes out later this year on that to catalog those pieces, but that's basically needed to kind of true it up with how that stuff can really get seeded within a DOT context. So that's the work that's ongoing now.
I'd be interested in having more briefings on the CBA when
Sure.
the report's out. And you mentioned like housing and work, like just I know this is out of scope of the DOT, but like for projects like these, where do workers live?
You know, it's a great question. I don't think I have a great answer for you today, but I'm happy to sort of look into it and bring it back and sort of reply on the side, because it is an interesting question. We will be in a place where we will have more work than the region knows what to do with when things are really cooking. So, you know, happy to, I just need to go and talk with folks about what they've seen in other programs. So
Yeah.
happy to look at that.
I mean, as Metro, you know, we're a multifaceted agency.
Absolutely.
That thinks a lot about housing and economic development.
Yeah.
And workforce, and yeah, just be interested in knowing how those parts fit together, especially as we are working on our next regional transportation plan, which kicks off next year. Like, how is this project gonna be integrated into that? And then how do, just in the short term, like how do workers get to the job site?
Yeah.
Is stuff I'm kind of thinking about. Like,
Absolutely.
what's that gonna look like? And is it just gonna be a traffic jam for 6 years?
Yeah. Certainly something we can bring back some information on. So.
Okay, that'd be good. Okay. Okay, well, seeing no more questions, thank you, and we'll see you next, a couple times.
Yeah.
The next 2
Yeah,
months.
you're welcome, or I'm sorry, and thank you
Yeah.
for your time. I really appreciate it.
Okay, we'll move on to our next presentation on supportive housing services, county fiscal year 2026, Q3 reports. Councilors, as you know, as part of Metro Supportive Housing Services Program, we have the opportunity to review the quarterly reports from each of our 3 county implementation partners. We have Yesenia Delgado, maybe, our SHS Division Director.
She's not like this. Probably just named her.
Okay. Well, we have our SHS team.
Yeah.
Welcome.
And I think that microphone got turned off. The what?
Yeah, there. Oh, this got.
Yeah. Here we go. Yep. Like 30 seconds.
Good morning, Acting Council President Wong and Metro Councilors. My name is Yesenia Delgado. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm the SHS Division Director. Metro's role is to provide oversight for the SHS Fund while also supporting with systems integration and acceleration to continue to build the regional system of care that we promised voters we would. And today's agenda item really covers on both of these 2 functions, and we'll be providing a status update in terms of where we're at via the Q3 reports. So today I'm joined with the SHS managers of the SHS division who are here today to bring you an update on the SHS funded work happening through Q3 of this year. Today's update will include an overview of the Q3 reports provided by our county partners and how they are advancing on their annual work plan goals to meet the 10-year goals and requirements for SHS. We will also be providing you all a Q3 update on the regional goals that were established by the former Tri-County Planning Body. And the focus really there will be to focus on the employee recruitment and retention goal, and then an update on the training goal. The quarterly reports at a high level provide us information on how the counties and Metro are tracking towards their work plan qualitative and quantitative goals, and then broader SHS requirements that we have set in place. These Q3 updates are a critical part of monitoring towards goals, assessing the financial health of the system, and also an opportunity to learn more about the regionalization work happening across the Metro region. So as the RPOC has launched, and you all have charged this committee with oversight, they will also be receiving these Q3 reports and the presentation, and we'll be able to review it and see if they have any questions directly for staff. We are continuing to work with our Metro councilors on this committee to figure out exactly how much of the oversight functions go to this committee versus Metro Council. So that'll be an ongoing conversation that we will bring to you all. And if we go to the next slide. Today's presentation will really focus, like I said, on the Q3 regional progress that covers the period from January 1st through March 31st of 2026. We will be discussing on the progress made towards the goals, how we're progressing on those, and then talking about county highlights. I will provide a brief financial update that just shares a little bit more with you all in terms of where we're at. And then we'll round out the conversation today with an update on the regional goals for the former Tri-County Planning Body. And then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So with that, I will pass it over to Lizzie, who's the Oversight Manager, to provide a little bit more context and information as to where the Q3 regional progress is at.
Thank you. Hi again, my name is Lizzie Cisneros. For the record, I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Supportive Housing Services Oversight Manager. Thanks for having me here today. I'm here to discuss the fiscal year 26 Q3 county reports. Each year, county partners submit their required annual work plans, and they are designed to connect back to the local implementation plans. Throughout the fiscal year, the county partners send quarterly report updates to share out their quantitative and qualitative progress towards their annual work plans. So next slide, sorry, forgot to slide you over. On this slide, you'll see the regional progress for the fiscal year 26 goals. The only thing I want to highlight is this does not include the housing with services and housing only. Those programs are shown county by county since differences in local administration of those programs do not roll up into regional placement category as we would expect. So we have already met our regional placement goals as of Q3, so that's exciting for us and the counties. This partly reflects winding down of new placements. We are seeing counties also meet goals around households who were already placed, which is the reason we highlighted all placements from year 1 to Q3. This captures all households that we have been placed, not just current active ongoing households. So programs for all placements include permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, and other housing programs. The reason why we wanted to capture this is because in the beginning of the measure, county partners were in a building phase, and they're now entering into a maintenance phase where they're trying to level out and sustain what they have built out. The goals appear as if they're getting lower, but they're actually supporting a tremendous amount of households throughout the ongoing SHS work. As we enter into year 6 of the measure, we have shifted the fiscal year 26 work plans to represent the continued work that is being achieved during the year, not just the new work that they're achieving. There are additional goals in the work plan that include qualitative goals, which is the county share progress on throughout the year, but they are formalized in the annual report. Next slide, please. So this is the Clackamas County update. Clackamas County has met their permanent supportive housing goal, and they are well within achieving both the rapid rehousing and the homeless prevention goals. Similar to the region, they're winding down their programs, and we are seeing them exceed their goal for households who have already been placed. So this is going to allow them to free up ARLA vouchers for new households that need them, which is a good thing ultimately. This program is, this new program is the Housing for Success program, which we highlighted here. This is a time-limited rental assistance program with the goals of maximizing permanent supportive housing capacity and bolstering stability and success. Some other program highlights for Clackamas County are continued moving families into the new completed Blossom and Community building, a 100-unit affordable housing development that includes 8 permanent supportive housing units supported by SHS-funded services and project-based vouchers. Residents including domestic violence survivors, older adults, and families reunifying after housing instability. They have found increased safety, stability, and opportunities for long-term success in supportive housing community environment. Next slide. This is the Multnomah County progress slide. So Multnomah County set the highest placement goals of the counties this year, and they continue to make great strides towards accomplishing their portion of the 5,000 goal. As of Q3, they have already met major placement goals in permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, and homelessness prevention. Some program highlights for Multnomah County is that they opened Caesar Apartments. This building offers 47 permanent supportive housing units and provides culturally specific services. They also improved program exit analysis to strengthen their regional long-term rent assistance program, and they made progress toward a modernized HMIS database. So another thing I want to highlight for the Multnomah County is that they recently did a work plan amendment because during Q2, Metro updated reporting guidance for the housing with services category to align to changes of the new SHS financial reporting template. So outcomes associated with recovery-oriented transitional housing and transitional housing have been removed from the housing with services and are now captured in safety on and off the streets category, which includes shelter and transitional housing in the financial workbook template. So earlier this year, we worked to update the definition for housing with services to reflect our ongoing collaborative work with our administrative roles. So housing with services is a category for programs that offer housing and supportive services to assist people experiencing or at risk of homelessness to achieve and maintain housing stability. Programs are categorized as housing with services if they do not meet the definitions of permanent supportive housing or rapid rehousing. So these programs don't necessarily fit the norm. An example of this would be a person who has an SHS subsidy and they're trying to utilize it to get into housing, but they have some barriers using the subsidy. So like past eviction notice or sex offender or maybe furniture needs or limitations around housing case management. So the housing with services category kind of overcomes some of those barriers and provides the services needed to get into housing and to stay into housing. So now that you have some context on housing with services, the change that Multnomah County made is better aligned with fiscal and programmatic outcomes while making it so we can no longer achieve the goal set at the beginning of the year since those programs are now captured elsewhere. They are changing the plan to align with the change and to promote cohesion and clarity to Metro and the public. So the revised housing with services goal is based on output targets and were set at the beginning of the fiscal year by programs remaining in the housing with services category. So the number of housing placements across permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, housing with services, and housing only is also affected by this revision. So the revised total reflects the sum of the placements across all 4 types. So hopefully that captures the shift of why they had to shift them. Next slide, please. So this is Washington County's fiscal year progress. Washington County met their permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing goals. We are seeing continued success with their ARLA rent assistance only, which is a move-on program that allows innovation for their use of SHS dollars. So similar to Clackamas, this will be great for reallocating SHS resources to new households who need it. And it reflects this trend that we are seeing around the graduating people who have already received placements. Some program highlights for Washington County are they advanced their major shelter and service infrastructure projects by announcing the future of Central County Safe Res Village location and Aloha, and they also launched a Community for Good neighbor agreement. Oh, we're not on the Washington County slide. There it is. They also began construction in the Hillsborough Access Center. This is one of many centers that serve as a safe and welcoming place for people living unsheltered by providing meals, storage, showers, and connections to shelter, housing, and other services. Washington County started phase 2 of the Just Compassion Resource Center, and which will expand access to services and housing navigation. So as you can see, Washington County has a lot moving through the pipeline, and we look forward to seeing their continued progress next quarter. And now I'll hand it back to Yesenia for financial updates.
Yeah, so these quarterly reports that we get, on a quarterly basis, and then the annual reports provide us a programmatic update, but also a financial update in terms of where we're at with the financial goals that we've set for that fiscal year. So I'll just be providing in this next slide a high-level overview of where financials are for SHS and kind of where we're at with meeting some of those goals and requirements set forth by SHS. So to start off with, this chart on this slide shows the SHS tax collections by fiscal year. And fiscal year 26 is the light purple line that you see here, and the other lines correspond to the other fiscal years. And even though it's already May, we thought it would be a good opportunity to share the spike in the April tax revenue, even though technically Q3 reports use more the August to February due to the time taxes that are collected and dispersed to the counties during that period of time. But I wanted to share this slight update with you all, even though it's slightly outside of the Q3 timeframe, because the great news is that the late prior year business taxes collected in October continue to keep the cumulative collections above all prior years, even though the monthly collections are in between for previous years. So the trends continue to indicate that the fiscal year 26 forecast could be the highest collection year since the SHS tax was approved. So at the end of Q3, a little over $170 million was collected in comparison to the spike that I'm sharing more with you all about in April. Almost $286 million have been collected now since that spike that we saw in April. So like I said, overall trends continue to show that we are right in alignment with our forecast / potentially coming in higher than we initially thought. And this next slide shows the regional spending so far that the Q3 reports information provided us. So as of Q3, we spent $232.9 million in combined spending by the end of Q3. And as a reminder, one of the SHS requirements is that counties set spend down goals for how much of the SHS funds that are collected will be spent every year. And right now what we're seeing is that on average, spending is on track with each of the counties and the goals that they set forth in their spend down plans. And this slide kind of reiterates where we're at as a region in that. As you can see here, the largest spending across regions by programs is permanent supportive housing, which connects back to what Lizzie was sharing. Permanent supportive housing is really the cornerstone of this program, and it really connects households that are of higher acuities into that longer retention. So that is kind of where most of the programming dollars are being spent right now for permanent supportive housing. The second category that you'll see here is safety on and off the streets that also Lizzie talked about. This category is a bit of a catch-all, and it really includes things like shelter, outreach, transitional housing. Even though we can kind of disperse it a bit more and be able to tell you how much we spent in shelter, this is the way it's currently framed up in our financial reporting. So that was where we are spending the second most amount of money as of Q3. And then as you'll see here, these other areas kind of fall under that. The other requirement that Metro provides oversight for are administrative rates, and the total Tri-County administrative rate averages around 5%, which is in line with the Metro recommendation that we have issued around this. And you'll see in the top yellow sliver of this chart is spending that we get on the Regional Strategy Investment Fund, otherwise known as RIF, which is what we'll actually be pivoting over to for you all to learn a little bit more about some of the programming and some of the goals that we're using and how we're advancing that fund. So with that, we can go to the next slide. So this next part of the presentation is really just an update on the former Tri-County Planning Body regional goals. So the former Tri-County Planning Body worked to meet the SHS requirements of building out a regional plan that would create a roadmap for goals, strategies, and outcome metrics for how we address homelessness in our region. And the Tri-County Planning Body elected to create this regional plan in what we call chapters. So approving 6 different goals, with each of these goals kind of being its own chapter in the regional plan that directs budgeting and investments in that particular goal area. And as you all know, we are working to implement an SHS reform to bring to you all around new frameworks for the Regional Investment Fund. So I will just note that today's update is really contextualized within the current RIF framework and the current regional plan as it currently is. And we're excited to be coming back to you all this summer on an update on the new RIF frameworks. So for today's presentation, we'll really just be focusing on 2 of the 6 Tri-County Planning Body goals, which will include a status update for the work happening under the current RIF framework and regional plan. And the 2 goals that Pune and Cole will touch on will be the employee recruitment and retention goal and then the training goal. So I will pass it over to Pune to get us started.
Okay, next slide, please. Hello, Metro Council. My name is Pune Abda Hosseini. I'm the SHS Policy Manager in the Housing Department. Today, I'm here to provide a high-level overview of the Employee Recruitment and Retention Regional Goal, also known as ERR. This work is being led by Kelly Horvath, a Senior Policy Analyst on my team, and supported by many other team members. So what is ERR? The ERR goal is focused on establishing regional standards for county contracts and SHS-funded agencies and providers to achieve livable wages for direct service staff. The work of shelter staff, outreach workers, housing navigators, case managers, traditional healthcare workers, and others in the regional homelessness response system requires a unique set of skills to address the often complex needs of the individuals and families who experience homelessness. This work requires flexibility in unpredictable situations and may occur in distressed areas or at all hours of the day and night. Homeless service workers often experience burnout. Traditionally, low compensation for workers in the homelessness response system and the historic contracting processes have contributed to issues. And over time, it has posed barriers to providers with the inability to hire and retain staff they need to effectively address homelessness. For these regions, the Tri-County Planning Body, also known as TCPB, set a regional goal focused on SHS employee recruitment and retention. ERR was the last approved regional plan. This plan took a few months to approve and was approved via a split vote. Some TCPB members and oversight committee members felt a need for swifter action on SHS wages than what was included in the work plan. The others felt the ERR goal needed to be reevaluated overall given the shift in budget landscape between the goal that was initially set in 2023 and then approved in late 2025. Next slide, please. So today I'm here to provide a high-level overview of the progress thus far for the 2 strategies included in the ERR regional goal. So those strategies include strategy 1, contract improvements, and then strategy 2, regional roadmap to achieve livable compensation rates. Next slide, please. So in 2024, after Home Base was retained by Metro as a consultant to support ERR work, one of Home Base's key recommendations to the TCPB was to make improvements in contracting and administrative processes to address cash flow and organizational health concerns by providers. In fall of 2024, Metro convened the ERR work group with relevant staff from 3 counties, and the contracting administrative policies emerged as a priority strategy. So strategy 1 includes the following. Looking at the use of 15% de minimis or negotiated indirect rate costs, advance payments, timely invoice payments, parallel pay, simplified reimbursement paperwork, and contract terms transparency. So strategy 1 progress so far. We have reconvened the ERR work group. This work group consists of both county representatives who meet monthly and SHS providers who meet quarterly. And we held our first provider convening this past March. We are currently updating the guidance memo with recommendations from the counties on a first package of contracting priorities, which will include indirect rates and advance payments. This package should be finalized by July after our June providers convening. We anticipate 3 packages. The second package will include guidance on timely invoice payments and parallel pay and streamlined reimbursement documentation. And the last package will focus on system improvements for streamlined reporting and transparency in contract terms. Next slide. So the second strategy focuses on establishing a regional structure and roadmap to achieve livable compensation rates, and will focus on 2 efforts. So the first effort, strategy 2A, includes providing a recommendation to Metro Council to act no later than early 2026 to convene a cross-sector regional homeless services workforce stabilization advisory body, or report back to the members of the TCPB on how the council will plan to otherwise enhance SHS workforce stabilization efforts. The second effort, strategy 2B, includes a regional wage survey to monitor geographic pay equity and process towards livable compensation rates. So far, we have completed the first regional SHS wage demographic survey, and those results were presented to the TCPB in December of 2025. So next steps, in terms of our next steps, the Housing Department plans to re-engage Metro Council by returning on July 16th with a deeper dive into the regional goal, specifically strategy 2. And with that, I will hand it off to my colleague Cole to continue the presentation with the update on the training regional goal.
Excellent. Good morning, Metro Councilors. My name is Cole Merkel. I use he, him, and his pronouns, and I am the Housing Regional Capacity Manager. Next slide, please. Just wanting to ground us first, training is really a fundamental skill for ensuring that there's a baseline level of knowledge and a role. It's especially important in housing and homeless services when we consider that frontline workers are working with vulnerable folks with very complex needs. In our region, there is not a standardized training for individuals to gain fundamental knowledge and skills that they need to work with people who are homeless, who have experienced housing insecurity. The Tri-County Planning Body directed Metro and the counties to develop training opportunities to support these frontline workers with the fundamental knowledge and skills they needed to operate at a high level of program functionality. And we've been responding to that. We've been working closely to implement this goal with our county partners. And some of the areas of the implementation strategy that we presented to the Tri-County Planning Body included meeting the gap now by making on-demand trainings through the National Alliance to End Homelessness available for free to any SHS provider who needed them. Metro has funded that, and nearly 300 providers have signed up for those trainings. We have funded training staff at each of the counties to administer proven programs that meet the work of their providers and their needs. And the most exciting part, which we're going to spend most of the time talking about today, is that we have developed a new, fully customized training program at Portland Community College to support housing service workers with the fundamental skills they need to support people experiencing homelessness. This program has been developed in close collaboration with the expertise of providers as well as our county partners. The entire regional capacity team, along with many county partners, have been part of this, but I want to give a special shout out to Housing Department staff, Justin Barrio and Malia Dieters, who have really taken a strong lead on this. There was a lot that happened in Q3 around the PCC program, Fundamentals of Housing Service Work, and we're about to launch it. So that's where I'm going to spend most of my time today. So on the next slide, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the process of how we got there. Last summer, after doing very intense research to determine both the training needs of our providers and to ensure that a training didn't already exist that met all of those needs, we finalized an intergovernmental agreement with Portland Community College to develop and deliver these trainings. Portland Community College helped us to identify a curriculum developer to turn the learning concepts that we'd finalized with the counties and providers into a coherent syllabus. Wanting to ensure that the training was reflective of those on the front lines, in Q3, Metro pulled together a group of seasoned professionals, all of whom had lived experience of homelessness, and all of whom were doing direct service work at SHS-funded providers to review the lectures, activities, and examples to make sure that they reflected the experience that they were having on the ground. To fill the initial cohort that's going to be launching in early June, we conducted outreach in Q3 to all of the service providers who'd given feedback along the way to this process over the course of the last 2 years. And in just 3 weeks, we received nearly 75 applications to enroll in the first cohort. To enroll, these folks have to work at SHS-funded providers, and we're working to prioritize folks who've been in the work for less than 6 months to give them that initial support that they might need. In total, we have 24 folks enrolled for the class that will run from June to July, and they represent the diversity of our region. We have providers from each county. We have providers representing our culturally specific providers, and we plan to host our second cohort in the fall with regular cohorts hosted thereafter. On the next slide, I'm going to talk just a little bit about the 2 courses themselves. They are Housing Service Worker Case Management Fundamentals and Housing System Navigation Essentials, Principles and Practices. They're being hosted through PCC's Career and Technical Education program, so they are non-credit, and that allowed us to develop these courses quite a bit faster than a credit course would have taken, and it allows them to be potentially taught at other institutions if others might be interested. We really tried to make these as open source as possible. After successfully completing both of the courses, students will receive a non-credit certificate called Fundamentals of Housing Service Work to prove that they have gone through the fundamentals of housing service work. And this summer, as we kind of get the first course piloted, we have asked folks to enroll in both. That being said, in the future, we're going to give folks the option to choose one or the other based on what their training needs are. On the next slide, I'm going to walk through just a little bit what some of the training topics will be. Each of these titles is the title for each of the 8 courses, and the topics really range from understanding our region's housing system to real strategies for how to navigate it. There are examples throughout every single course that are relevant to the experience service workers are having in the greater Portland region, and there are activities designed to help folks think strategically as they help their clients navigate through the housing and homeless service system. These topics are ones that our region's providers have long needed and have long been asking for, well before SHS. I think back to my days as a case manager and how helpful this would have been. And during our curriculum development process, a seasoned caseworker told me how amazing this would have been to have been able to take when they were first starting out. So through our collaborative work with the counties and with providers, we've been able to build a training that we think meets the specific needs of our service providers and will be a key part in helping to regionalize consistent practices for our entire system of care. I'm excited about it. Lots of great work happening in Q3. And I think with that, we will turn it over to questions on the next slide.
Okay, thanks so much for presentations. Colleagues, any questions? Start with Councilor Simpson.
Thank you, Acting President Wong. Thank you all for your presentation. This is really, really good work. I'm most interested in the last piece because I think like that has been like the biggest gap is understanding how to pay folks, how much to pay them, like how to retain them. And I really like to see that there's a body of work being built through the college system, which is key. I know that we're standing up a certification program now, but in the future, do you see a world where this certification program actually gets built out into a real certified credential program where folks are being trained and turned out to be, not just work in our economy, but in other places that are also experiencing homelessness?
Yeah, I think that's always been the bigger picture vision, and also how can we connect with the work that Pune's team is doing around employee recruitment and retention. Certainly, we need to start somewhere.
Yep.
The place that we're starting right now is we know folks need these fundamental skills. One thing that I'll say that's exciting is that Portland Community College is even thinking about how they might be able to take some of these course components and move them into some of their actual accredited programs as well, along with the work that we're already doing. So yeah, the longer term workforce is a bigger picture question that we've been wrestling with for a bit.
Yeah, I think it's one we'll wrestle with for a time, but I like the path that we're moving in, and I'm really grateful for that. I just had to ask that question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Lewis.
Awesome work, team. This is the exciting part of what the Tri-County Planning Body spent the better part of 3.5 years working on. So thank you for presenting 2 of the 6 items. And it is not lost on me that we've had time to really dive deep on the medical system and how we braid Medicaid dollars. But we're just getting the highest level of brushes on these 2. buckets of investment that I think are absolutely key to building a system that transforms well beyond just how our SHS dollars are spent. So for me, I think it's really important that we understand that the workforce issues, particularly around how contracts are developed and deployed, they're not moving. The counties are not moving to rectify these issues fast enough. We've had these discussions now going on at least 2 year-end reports from the old oversight committee, and things are still really challenging. And as the world begins to have different layers of fray because of our economy, I think the strain is further exacerbated. So my hope would be that the 6 areas, these 2 in particular, are not ones that we divest from or take our eye off of. So when our new oversight committee is discussing how we spend our regional dollars, how the regional dollars get deployed, I think is really critical. These 2 things are invested in. They're invested in directly through Metro, and that there is accountability, and it's not just a lens that you push county dollars through. And I would say finally, the work of checking in on how our counties are doing is really critical. But at the oversight committee, what was it, just 2 weeks ago, we heard one county say, all of the questions in our reports are with a frame of building out a system or further building something new. We're past building new. We're just doing at this point. And to some extent, sure, we're no longer in startup phase, but what you've just presented today, we're still moving the system along. And in fact, there are places where there's still giant gaping holes in the system. So I really want to push hard against that idea that we're asking the wrong thing of our counties by asking them to still be innovative, build new. In fact, I want them to start taking bricks out and redeploy those resources to build the new system. Thank you. That wasn't a question.
Thank you.
Councilor Rosenthal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, a quick technical question from earlier on the presentation. In each of the slides for the counties, you said total number of placements since year 1. And I just want to get the date as to when year 1 starts. And I'm assuming that those total number of placements, and this is maybe a suggestion, that another line that would be helpful because it's so critical in some areas is total number of housing prevention interventions, which is also a thing I think we've realized that that's also something with the continuing increase in number of homelessness, that those interventions are very important. But what is the year 1? Since year 1 is since the start of the program, but I was just trying to remember what year we started keeping track of that from. And then, the second question has to do with the training.
Yeah, so the measure passed in 2020 and we did start collecting dollars and started to implement this in like fiscal year 21. So this is when you see that data of like since the inception of SHS, it's going back to like fiscal year 21 and the progress that we've made there in terms of overall households served. As you see here, we do have data on homeless preventions as well, but the annual reports are really where we build that story of like year over year and how many households have been served and retained in housing and how many are we sustaining since the beginning of SHS. So these are just the quarterly reports that I think, as Councilor Lewis was mentioning, is really intended around the new placements, the new services that we're developing. The annual reports really paint a better picture for some of these analysis points that you're describing.
Okay, thank you. And then regarding the training, how much time in the training? I mean, there are a lot of things on the technical aspects of the training. How much time is spent in these courses at Portland State in listening, story listening? As we understand it, almost everybody has a unique story and a unique situation that has to be dealt with. And it seems that understanding or getting people to express the true nature of their problem is one of the big things. And I'm just wondering how much of attention is paid to that.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, thank you for that question and that kind of that depth of knowledge of how important it is for frontline workers to really lean in and understand. I think there are a couple of ways that we built that in. First and foremost, we reached out ahead of the course as we were developing it to get real life scenarios from frontline folks in the region. And we developed kind of a list of like, these are things that I've had to deal with. And we had the curriculum developer actually put some of that into the work that that folks will be hearing. So there are complex scenarios that they'll be getting. And then from there, I think that there is a lot of opportunity for the groups to work through, potentially bring in their own expertise as they're working through some of those complex scenarios and how to support folks. And then I think the other aspect that you're maybe referring to would be called motivational interviewing, which is really about how do you chat with somebody to really understand where their various needs are. And that is an aspect of the courses as well, as having that kind of trauma-informed opportunity to really learn how to sit with somebody and talk with them about some of the needs that they might have.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it's just my impression that a lot of people who are facing these problems, sometimes they get very frustrated and almost feel fairly hopeless, and they don't know where to start. And so getting them to start in the right place and getting them a consistent approach is sometimes fairly critical. So that understanding and listening aspect seems to be pretty important. Yeah. Thank you.
Councilor Nolan.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I want to echo Councilor Lewis's comments. I appreciate the launching efforts that had to be applied to this program when it was first approved by voters, but we're halfway through the current funding stream, and we need to be implementing and not still building new. Because there are human beings who count on it, and because the voters we expect and intend to ask to support ongoing or additional funding for this program will expect it. And I keep hearing us collectively, including you, us, other partners, talking about what activities we've done and not what outcomes we've achieved for people living on the street. And I would like you all to talk about how we shift that attitude. If I own a fruit and vegetable operation in Washington County, as friends of mine do, they don't measure the success of their agricultural business by how much fertilizer they put on the ground, or don't, because they hand weed and all those other things. They measure it by how much product they ship to farmers markets and to grocery stores. And it seems to me we're counting the fertilizer and the seeds and the other things that go into the result that serves actual human beings. And we don't talk as much about lowering the number of people who still need these services. I have heard that there are factors we don't control, and I'm not disputing that, but that's a reality we deal with. And we should nonetheless be thinking about how do we move to the point where our measurement of success isn't how many shelter beds we have, but how many fewer people are sleeping in cars or vans or on the street.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Nolan, for those comments and questions that I heard in there. I'll just note that you're absolutely right. I think these quarterly reports that we present to you all are based on the governance and goals and requirements that were set at the onset of the measure and back in 2020, which were really more around tracking outputs and tracking the number of beds, the number of placements, the number, and even though we had maybe some of these more evaluative factors and metrics that we were tracking in there, like retention rates, returns to homelessness. I mean, inflow and outflow is also a thing that we track there, but it's not one of the core goals and requirements. So that is why these reports are tailored in that way. But I think where we really have an opportunity to shift is with the SHS reform that you all passed around updating our 4 or 5 year goals, KBIs and KPIs. And I think that that really speaks to what you're describing of like, what does it look like to not just be tracking the outputs or like the things that we did or new placements, but what does it look like to track that really performance and how we as a system are meeting some of these key goals that we've set forth. And just so you know, we've done some really great work on advancing that reform that you all passed late last year. We'll be coming back to the Regional Policy and Oversight Committee at this next meeting, an update on where we're at. And I do think that the way we're shifting the goals really speak to more the performance of the system, how efficient we're being, how we're controlling the things that we can control to make the system better and not just be tracking, 100 new shelter beds this quarter or something like that. And then we will be providing you all as Metro Council, given that this is your reform, an update on that in early July in terms of where that body of work is headed, given that then you all have to do the final approvals for the how we kind of steer the system for these next 4 years of SHS and create goals that are really intended to track performance and efficiency rather than just some of these outputs or fertilizer as you put forth in your metaphor.
Thanks. That's fabulous. I'm very impatient. My colleagues understand that about me. And I want to, I know we have activities we have to do every day because people are counting on them. But when we think about, well, we can't control the environment around here, as I said, I don't dispute that, but we can anticipate it and we can acknowledge it and maybe shift what we're doing because the environment is different than it was even in 2020 when voters approved this. And I don't know how much leeway the four of you have in achieving that. If you need to tell us that we need to give you a different direction or that the RPOC needs to give you a different direction and prioritize outcomes instead of outputs. I want to give you an invitation to speak plainly.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Nolan, for that. And I think you all have, via your reforms, have given us that guidance. And that's the work that we've been building towards to be able to track and move more towards outcomes and in this next phase of SHS as we have done a lot of the work to set the foundation. So thank you all for providing that guidance and we look forward to reporting back where we're at with it.
Thanks.
Okay, Councilor Gonzalez.
Yeah, a few questions from me. I am wondering from the on the first few set of kind of presentation on the outcomes of different elements from the counties, those are only outcomes that are paid for by SHS, right? It's not all of the homelessness system.
That's right.
What would it take for us to get a full regional snapshot of all homeless impact from all the money in the system, regardless of SHS? I feel like that's an important thing for us to understand everything that we're trying to do as a region.
Yeah, that is a really great question and one that I don't have like this perfect answer for you on, but I can share a little bit more about the work that we've been doing and some of the opportunities and maybe challenges that we ran up against. So in our annual report, one of the requirements via the 2020 SHS work plan is that we request what we call like leverage funds for SHS from each of our county partners. So it's something that's in the annual reports that you can see. Yeah, so it would be what are the other, so SHS is this one funding source. What are the other homeless services fundings that you leverage to maximize SHS? So in there, we get a snapshot of the county's additional funding sources that support the regional system of care that they're building. So any federal, state funds, is what they are reporting that. So it gives us a vision that I could share with you in terms of what we have available. What we have learned through that process, though, is that, for example, HUD sometimes directly awards to service providers, or philanthropy organizations do that, or other funders. And that sort of information all goes into the system, and we as Metro don't have like a good access point. I think an opportunity for that would be the Regional Policy and Oversight Committee. I think that that theme continues to come up around SHS funded data versus broader system-wide data. And I think that that could be a potential, like, I think if that body of group agreed that there is value in Metro tracking all homeless-wide data to leverage the impact, but to also be able to make policy decisions around, like, when we're seeing an impact on this funding sources, how can we better leverage SHS, which is a local flexible funding source? But I think what we'd really need is buy-in from the community, because we would be asking them to share their data with us, and for what purposes. So like I said, we do have some data, but there's a broader strategy needed if we wanted to get like a better insight into all the data available.
Yeah, thanks, Yesenia. I think that's a strategy that I feel really compelled by. And I mean, like you mentioned at RPOC, and I think, you know, when you're talking to everyday Portlanders, they're like, what is the impact of the entire system? And they don't want to hear, well, you know, the SHS money's blue, the state money's red, or is like green or whatever. They're just like, just tell me how much is happening here. And it's understandable because of how our system and our bureaucracy has evolved over decades, but it's also incredibly frustrating, I think, for like, again, an everyday Portlander or Oregonian that just wants to see us work on and fix the problem. So that's something that I'm really interested in working on, and just this push for regionalization, pushing very hard on that. And I know that currently our IGAs really limit our ability to do that, not just with SHS funding, but you know, a lot of these changes, the language in the IGA, just to remind my peers, the counties have to agree to how they're measured, you know, how their corrective actions are issued. If we want to change the report, they have to agree to how, you know, they report to us as well. So, I mean, there's these kind of things built into that I want to acknowledge, but we can't continue with that attitude if we want to see this measure continue to flourish and extend. So it's just kind of a question. Thank you for answering, and then sprinkling my opinion on top of that. A question for Cole under the PCC program certification. Pretty cool to see the work happening there. To me, it brought up further questions, which is, you know, is our goal to train every single SHS funded position in this program, or is it like, you know, optional? What's the kind of the, you know, perfect end case there? And also it made me think about how many total FTE are being supported by SHS across the 3 counties, at providers, at our counties, at Metro. Do we have an answer? I'm sure that answer is somewhere, like how many people are working in the system provided by SHS, and then, you know, what percentage of those people are expected to complete this certification?
Yeah, thank you. For right now, we are creating this as optional. We wanted this to be something that could be available to incoming folks.
Yep.
I think the thing that's important to keep in mind is that there are folks who've been doing this work for 10 plus years who probably don't need to go through a 101 level training. And so we don't want to make that a requirement. There's a potential option for, you know, some credit for prior learning if we were to potentially move into the more, you know, certification required of folks who potentially pass an exam. It's a little bit further down the road. To the other question around the FTE across the counties, do you have that number off the top of your head?
Not off the top of my head, but it is certainly something that we could follow up. We have a couple different mechanisms via our annual report and wage study that I think we could get some data to you on. Service providers and county staff might be a little trickier, but we could see what we can pull.
Yeah, thank you. It's just really interesting to think about. And I know that our counties also, you know, do a significant amount of training there as well, but it's helpful. On the certification, kind of the bullet points of the things that we would cover in the PCC curriculum, one of the elements that I would like to see kind of included as and this was covered in our March resolution that Acting President Wong and I worked on and brought to the council, which is the continuous improvement lens. Specifically though, what I want to connect the dots here on is, I've heard a lot from the frontline workers, folks that are case managers, folks that are hitting the streets, that in the system, there are not a lot of places for their voice and their expertise to kind of feed upward into change in terms of, the part of our continuous improvement work is implementing different tools to look at if someone is waiting to get a voucher, and there's 8 steps in that, right? Like one step takes 3 weeks because there's only one person approving the voucher and, they might be on vacation. So it's like those redundancies and making sure how we can make that better is how do we make sure that like they're learning about how can the system learn from them as well for broader improvement. So not just like what do we expect from them to do their work, but how can their voice also continue to do that? And I think that's a culture of the system that I want us to see. It's like how can we constantly be improving what processes, what bureaucracy, what layers can we continue to optimize over and over again? And it's something that I would like to kind of see a part of that, especially since I imagine most of these folks will be new frontline workers that are really passionate and that we've seen data of people burning out because they feel like, one, the work is very demanding, and also when I see something that's not working, no one quite listens to me. So thank you for that. And then my last question is on invoicing and cash flow, which was one of the TCPB goals that we covered today. I've worked for a service provider for my career. I've also, know many of the service providers that are doing this work. The invoicing and cash flow is so significant. I've had executive directors that basically say to some extent that providers are financing local governments at 0% to do this work, on the backs of their general funds, on their backs of their programs. And just like what this means is if you're a service provider, right, like you know this, but for folks that are maybe watching in the audience, let's say that you're expected to spend $1 million, right? You're spending that money up front and then you're getting reimbursed. You don't know when you're going to get reimbursed. It might be a few weeks, it might be a few months. And that lack of reliability is hard. It's hard for us as households, as families to know like, oh man, am I going to get paid every 2 weeks? Am I going to get paid, once a quarter? And when it gets in the hundreds of thousands and the millions of dollars, I mean, it's really hard for organizations that need to make cash flow. So I just really want to highlight that. I'm glad that the TCPB has highlighted this. It is so essential. And I like some of the things that we're looking at, some more upfront payment, the de minimis, super important, feels like a pretty basic. So that's great. I think on the other side of that argument as well is I'm really curious how many total providers are in the SHS ecosystem, because I imagine that there's a lot of inefficiency. Let's say that we have 500 individual nonprofits delivering like a really bespoke or really boutique program. I mean, that's 500 companies that basically are vendors that we need to do all these processes and all these things for. I would imagine too that there is optimization in kind of consolidating or in focusing our investments a little bit more. And I think that's probably not a very popular thing to say, especially with providers. But I do think that we're talking about two sides of the issue that I think it's important to look at from the county side, the challenges they probably face, and I'm sure there's more, but also with the providers and the challenges they face. Certainly something I would like to look into a little bit more. So I guess that's a question. Have we looked into that, kind of the scale of the number of providers? When we study other regions that are exceptional in this work, like what is the kind of general nature of amount spent per provider, or do they have less? Do they have more? Is it irrelevant? I am kind of curious to learn a little bit more about that, and specifically how as our region looks to improve and be healthier in the long run, what are changes that we should be advocating for at this table that help us get there?
Yeah, thank you for those questions and comments. And on the invoice payment, I just want to note that that is in terms of Metro's role of providing oversight and also policy recommendations for how we regionalize the system. Like, I think that that's a really great example because we did hear a lot of feedback around invoicing. That's actually something that Lizzie's team then went out and monitored last year to better learn the practices. And I think overall things have gotten better over the years since we've launched SHS, and that's what that monitoring really indicated. There were still some questions and some offerings that we made around like backup documentation and why is it that this provider has like 2-page backup documentation, but this provider a lot more. So there's still things there that we're still working to streamline. And I think this TCBB regional goal has really provided us that table, as Pune was talking about, of how can we both balance the flexibility that our service providers need with the responsibility that we have financially and fiscally to ensure that, you know, we're being good public stewards of these dollars. But I think in that same table, in that same space, that is where some of those conversations could also potentially happen in the future around the future of our service providers. I know that we have, and we'll get you the exact number, but give or take probably 100 service providers across the metro region that are working to implement SHS or are qualified service providers to be able to do that work. And I know that the themes that you're elevated, even though you're saying that they're not maybe the most popular among service providers, I know that some of them are also having them. Like I had coffee with an executive director a couple weeks ago where they were like, you know, a few years ago, I would have said never to some of these concepts, but just given where we're also at as a system with managing for some of the financial headwinds, like I think people are potentially eager to engage in a conversation around that. So I'll note that we haven't done a whole lot of work around researching other areas with this particular lens of like providers and potentially what it looks like to like optimize that and if consolidation would be a potential answer to that. I do think that as we come back to you all in July on the employee recruitment and retention update around what that workforce was, that work group or that task force that TCBB recommended could get launched, that could be something that group could look into, the health of the workforce and what that looks like in terms of contextualizing the number of providers that we have in our system. So yeah, thank you for the feedback, and we'll definitely think about it and in terms of how we like bring to you that update on potential options for that workforce and task force.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go back around. Councilor Simpson.
Thank you, Acting President Wong. Real quickly, Yesenia, I want to pull on a thread that Councilor Gonzalez brought up, and particularly around not our SHS funds, but funds that do come through the door. I know that in other process, and this might be my naivety around it, but when you go after funds, you have to, in any grant application or whatever, you have to state in your budget if other funds are going to be utilized. Is that something that is done in practice with these funds when providers apply for them?
Yeah, I know that back when I was more involved at the service provider level, that was something that we had to do, exactly what you're describing of like, you get this grant, these are all the match dollars that you're providing to this. I believe that practice continues to exist, but I would need to really like look into how exactly it's being operationalized. But at a macro level, that's exactly, I think, what we were trying to track with the regional outcome metrics in the 2020 work plan of like, okay, here are your SHS dollars. Let's ensure that you don't displace any of your general funds. And then what are your additional leverage funding sources for this service? So that's what we were trying to do at the macro level. But like I shared when the answer was brought up, like it's just been a little bit more challenging to get a full picture of all the dollars that are out there, especially at the service provider level.
Yeah, and I guess for me, we always have to track dollars, right? Like our personal incomes, all of that, right? How do we get to a place where we can see that snapshot to see how much money is actually going into the system outside of our SHS dollars so that we can truly capture like the weight of what's happening? Because I think I don't want to put more work on the service providers, but also like we need a real clear picture of like what the cost is. Because if we are part of the cost and we're only debating about just that portion, then we need to talk about what's really paying for this system, so that when we get into a different administration, we can know what the appropriate ask is.
Yeah. And I know that there are studies that have come out of the state that kind of try and get to this question of like trying to estimate and forecast all the different funding sources in our region and our state level that I could share with you, but that's what those are. They're really just estimate and ideas. I think in order to get to what you're describing, I think it really looks like there being a collective buy-in across our region of like everyone that gets homeless funding services in one way or another. You know, how do you share that information with the body? I think Metro is really well positioned to be able to be that body because of our role across the region. And then how do we have kind of some clear parameters around like what we're going to use with the funding sources? Because I think, you know, even as I've engaged some service providers, they're like, well, why do you want to know that? Are you going to start telling me then how to use my funds? But I think as long as we frame it in exactly how you were describing of like, we just want to see the whole picture and the impacts and be able to run some analysis and data. Like, I do wonder if that's like a collective vision that our region and service providers and counties and like philanthropic, like all the different entities that work together could get behind. And I know I already said it, but I think RPOC like is a really great place to like channel that conversation and like collectively make that ask out.
Yeah. Can we do that? Can you do that?
Definitely look into it.
Thank you. Thank you, Yasin.
Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you. I am coming back around because I'm really struck that the work of helping folks is not ever going to be AI'd. We are maybe going to be using more computer tools so that our data systems are not giant stacks of paper stuck in a folder, eventually turned over to PSU and then manually entered. But we're always going to have people helping people. And I know one service provider who just got recruited to go to Seattle. We are now definitely a place where people are coming to recruit our workers because they're really good. We can't keep them here if we don't recognize the training experience they have, and that happens through pay and benefits. These workers are themselves oftentimes on the brink of homelessness. Some of them almost qualify for the services they themselves provide, and yet their employers are oftentimes not allowing them to avail themselves of things like using the laundry facilities, even though they're working a night shift at the shelter. So I do think that there's a lot that we need to do to humanize what shows up to us as numbers, objectives, goals, whatever we want to call them. And I think that the work that we're doing, particularly on the training front, is important. But I didn't hear us mention today the giant convening that we're planning. And I guess I don't want to like micromanage, but I would like to find a way through that convening to really do something from Metro that says we see you and we understand what tensions there are, and that you're always going to be a human being in between government and other human beings, and that is going to be uniquely unfair to have to always find balance. So whatever we can do, not only to offer resources and training in that convening space, but also be really real in how we see people and recognize them. Try and keep them here if we can.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I believe you're referring to the provider conference that we've shared a little bit more about. Yeah. We just had a planning meeting last week to talk a little bit more about that. And that theme kind of really struck out. And we're working on that. How do we blend in, yes, the technical systems or training or information that we want to do, coupled with the support and celebrating and like really calling in the wonderful work that our service providers do for this system. And I know that we do want to get additional feedback from you all as counselors on that. So just know that that will be probably coming in a 2-on-1 to just give you a more thorough update in terms of where that work is and then anything else that you might want to see.
Great, thank you.
Councilor Rosenthal.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. I just want to comment and give some kudos. I think that the work that's been done in the last couple of years is rather amazing. I realize it's a lot of work. We have a lot of questions, as you know, you sit here and we ask questions, and we always bring up new things that we want you to answer, and you usually try and respond, but it's a lot of work. You know, there's more training, we have more goals, we have RPOC, which is going to continue to add things to the mix. But I think we've done perhaps more than I would have expected, starting from scratch and with very little other than a concept and with no regionalization. And I think we've made a lot of progress. As Councilor Nolan said, we still have to pay much more attention to the actual outcomes. But I think we're starting to get there. And I think we're getting people to realize, at least in the jurisdictions, that we are making this progress. So I think I just want to say kudos for a lot of hard work. You guys are working a lot harder than we are on this, and I appreciate it. Oh, and I also want to comment one thing. It's interesting to note that in spite of all the economic gloom that we've seen, we see a potential year with a higher revenue coming in for SHS funding, which would imply that the economy isn't doing quite as bad as some people seem to think.
Thank you.
Could be doing better.
I think it's all to jump here.
Oh, no, sorry, I didn't go down.
One thing I've been reading about in the press is like some organizations closing down. And I'm wondering about just, you know, getting too far into specifics. Is that a failure of like financial structure or training or what? Because I sense that we're going to see potentially more of that happening, and it's very disruptive to the system. So yeah, what is your all's take on when that happens and how to prevent and or, you know, protect the system when that happens?
Mhm. Yeah, and I think at least of the situations that I'm aware of, I think that the reasons do vary. You know, I think it's a combination of the financial headwinds that organizations are facing, given less funding. You know, and we talk a lot about the homeless service system, but a lot of nonprofits, you know, they serve the whole person. So even as there's been healthcare cuts, SNAP cuts, you know, like all of those less funding sources have had an impact on service providers and nonprofits. But I think you're right. I think that there have also been other situations where maybe if an organization had some additional support around technical assistance, or, you know, how to kind of manage for some of the things that are coming up, that could been supportive. So yeah, I think it's something that we should definitely keep our pulse on. I think you're right to maybe assume that more of that could be happening in the future, given where we're at with some of the future financial projections in our region. But yeah, I mean, that's all I really have to offer, unless anyone else has any other insight.
Anything for you, Cole?
Concur with you, Senia. It's a really complex series of headwinds, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easy to read one of those articles and think the same for like every provider in the whole system. I think it's just really challenging both when organizations fail, because then now there's obviously like RFPs to find replacements. But yeah, I don't know. I think there's something that we should structurally look at and like make sure we're looking at the health of the system. Councilor Lewis.
Yeah, I just want to chime in on that. I think in this part of the region, or this part of the state, I'll say very specifically, we have several different typologies of nonprofits that do this work. And the ones that have been struggling the most recently are those that have been very attractive to government funders because they're very quote unquote efficient, but almost all of their funding is coming through government, and they're not supported as much by a budget that's balanced by philanthropy and real people. So they're less able to withstand even a small cut. And at the same time, I think that they're also a little bit disconnected from some of the larger ecosystem of other nonprofits that are more community rooted. So I just really want to lift up that when there is a nonprofit that's balanced and it's not just a government contractor kind of by wit, they are able to pull some levers that the others are not. And I'm not dismissing that they're not having they are having incredibly strained finances right now, but they're somehow making it through while the others are not. And I just want to lift up that we need to be there for those that are navigating that really narrow path, even as those government contractor organizations are falling apart.
Thank you. Okay, well, thanks for all the time and looking forward to further discussions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. That's our presentations for the day. We'll move on to COO Communications.
Thank you so much. I have two committee report outs. I'm going to start with TED for Planning, with JPACT.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Council. I'm the Transportation Policy Director here today to give an update on the 21st JPACT meeting. I'll go through just the highlights and appreciate the JPACT Metro Council members to chime in as well. So we had, oh, thank you, Georgia. Is that all right? We had one substantial issue on the comments from the chair section where we were asking for an endorsement or an okay with an endorsement letter from Chair Lewis to send to our House congressional delegation endorsing the what's called the Basics Act, which is a what's called a marker bill for the next federal reauthorization of the transportation funds, federal transportation funds, and is endorsed by local officials, organizations from across the country, including the Association of Metropolitan Planning Organizations, League of Cities, Association of Counties, and lays out what those local agency organizations would like to see in the next authorization bill. It was interesting because the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee actually released their own version of the bill that very same week, last week. Some of the elements of the Basics Act that is endorsed by the local officials associations were included, but many things were not in that first version of the House bill. So we felt it was still important to send the endorsement of the Basics Act letter so that we can continue to advocate for the addition of the elements that have not been included to try to get them included in the final bill. And that was given the thumbs up by the committee. On the consent agenda, we had three substantial items: the adoption of the Unified Planning Work Program, the acceptance of the Regional Emergency Transportation Routes report, and the monthly Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program amendments. Those were all items that then you saw later that same day and adopted. And then there were two discussion items, a briefing of the Interstate Bridge Replacement Project, which you also received a briefing on today. I would say the conversation on that at JPACT was fairly similar. Probably some more emphasis on diversion concerns of the project and some more comments on project scope issues, such as the number of travel lanes for motor vehicles and sort of questions about the light rail provision of future light rail service, and a short discussion around whether the newly defined project that is going to fund preliminary engineering and project development of the light rail project would actually include that all the way up to the Evergreen Station. And then finally, there was a briefing on the Community Connectors Transit Study, which defined, at this point, was focused in on the definition in the draft of the draft opportunity areas where that sort of community level transit service would be or is identified as most ready to implement in the near and medium term future. That report will come back in the fall, both to JPACT and the council for your final briefing and decision in September and October. And so that, unless any of the members have anything to add, that was the content of the JPACT meeting. Okay. Great, good.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And one more committee update. We have Sabrina Owens-Wilson, DEI Director, to give an update on CORE.
Good afternoon, Acting Council President Wong, Metro Councilors. My name's Sabrina Owens-Wilson. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Director of the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Department. I'm here to provide a brief recap of CORE's, the Committee on Racial Equity's last meeting on Thursday, May 21st. As a reminder, the Committee on Racial Equity's role is to advise council and staff on the implementation of our racial equity strategy and broader racial equity strategies that are implemented through Metro's policies, programs, and investments. At the May 21st meeting, the committee debriefed and shared thoughts about the cancellation of the April core meeting. We had originally planned for the discussion to focus on the Loan for Memorial project, but as we got closer to the meeting, it became clear that we needed more time to plan a conversation that would be constructive and considerate of the deep and complicated dynamics around this project. The DEI department determined it was best to postpone the conversation until we could prepare for a fruitful conversation, and so we made the decision to cancel the meeting. This decision was not made lightly, nor to avoid the conversation. It was made to honor the complex histories, the range of engagement from community members, as well as the charge of the committee. Last week's meeting, core members shared their reactions, as well as asked important questions about the structure of core and how decisions are made. The conversation also brought up questions and really a challenge around holding space to have difficult conversations while also being mindful not to cause harm in the process of that. It was also an opportunity for us to reiterate the scope of core and its focus on systems level work. While the conversation was difficult, we appreciated the openness from core members and the desire to keep challenging our systems to hold complicated and complex equity conversations. The second agenda item, the committee heard from the Housing Department, which is launching a departmental community engagement principles. We were running short on time because of the previous topic. So core members really got kind of a high level summary, and several committee members were interested in engaging with that project team further with an additional session to discuss the engagement plan. And I really want to appreciate the Housing Department's team in working with us on with their flexibility and as we navigated some complexities around this meeting. So before I share what's coming up next month, I will make space for Acting Council President Wong to share any comments.
Gosh, yeah, I had the opportunity to participate this past week, and a lot of real and difficult conversation, but I think it's necessary. I think, you know, when we do racial equity work, it's not a clearly defined process, and, you know, we had to layer on all the conversations and input and difficult decisions on the loan for a process itself, because, you know, we're working with ancestors, and then layering that on to the process in modern times. So it was a rich conversation overall. I think one thing I'm looking forward to when the memorial was done is doing a deeper kind of audit and capturing all the lessons learned, just because it was, you know, extremely sensitive all around, you know, both historically, but also in the present. So I'm going to commend the DEI staff for being, you know, really thoughtful and preventing additional harm while also, you know, sticking true to our values. Additional.
Any question? Okay. The next core meeting is scheduled for June 18th. We are still working through a number of dynamics, so I'll be sure to follow up with council on what the next agenda item is. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to Councilor Communications. Councilor anything?
Sure, that's something.
Okay, Councilor Rosenthal.
Well, I thought you were going to go with Councilor Gonzalez. I'll just report on three things quickly. First of all, as many of you know, someone were able to attend the Glean art exhibit opened last week. It's again a very great effort of using trash to create creativity. The stories of the artists were very interesting, and some of the art was really rather wonderful, and some of it very fanciful, particularly the tower of kids' toys, which I thought has to go in some playroom someplace because the kids are just gonna love it. I don't know that it'd come here. We might have too
You
much
might have
fun.
a tall enough ceiling.
Secondly, I wanted to mention that over at the Winning Stad, we had one of the cultural performance lectures was held last week. Paulo Ramos talking about the problems particularly faced in the Hispanic communities, and particularly with some of the political identifications going on. She's a reporter, and she has been very active in trying to interpret the various trends going on in the Hispanic communities throughout the country. And that was very well received. It was a good crowd. And then finally, some of us were able to attend the ERCO gala this last Saturday. And again, it was a lot of people. ERCO does great work, and we should all pay attention to it. The work of providing for immigrants who come in not speaking the language and need a place of refuge is something that we should all pay attention to.
Councilor Gonzalez?
Thanks, Acting President Wong. Yeah, just a quick update. Last week, Council President Wong and I were able to attend the best practice trip in Vancouver, British Columbia, which is a gorgeous city in Cascadia. And we were joined by a fair delegation of other Metro employees as well. Just want to share some of the really top line themes that I'm walking away with. As many of you know, last Tuesday we had an election. That election handily defeated a gas tax, which would have created a significant amount of revenue to support ODOT and TriMet and other things. The reason I bring that up is Vancouver has a $1 a gallon gas tax, basically. And they actually cannot refer that to the voters. It's like by their own local rules. It's a board sets the rate and people have to live with it. Vancouver, my understanding is pays the highest gas in North America. So just in general, they have a transit ridership that's 3x ours. So like 3 times per capita ours. They also have generally the same geography of our region, kind of like so they have a bit of a different set of geographic limitations, obviously different tax code and things like that, but just a stunning and beautiful city with density and transit, I think, in a way that we aspire to support our region significantly. Also, they are hosting the World Cup, so we are able to look at the city's economic development through the lens of tourism and through the lens of sports, which obviously with our work at Expo and our work with many other partners are trying to untap that work. And we also were able to learn quite a bit about the film industry in Vancouver, which is like Hollywood North, and plaudits to us for also making investments in that space. During one of the panels, there was a quote that I think Andrew Colas, who's a Portlander, said. One of his takeaways was that it felt like in Vancouver, British Columbia, people worked to get to yes faster, which was nice to hear. Hey, grass is always greener, right? Grass is always greener. When you're on these tours and presentations, there are no problems, right? But it was like, yeah, so Vancouver, they get to yes faster. And he was like, in Portland, it feels like we get to no slower. And there's just this theme, and why I appreciate these trips so much is, you get the sense of what's possible and the scale of what's possible when you create alignment. But when you have a strategy, you just do your best to execute that strategy. Despite what the haters have to say, I think was really inspiring, especially as I know we're all trying to figure out how does our region kind of reemerge from this pandemic sluggishness that we can't quite seem to fully shake off. So hopefully great days ahead for us, and it was a really rewarding trip.
Great summary. Councilor Nolan, did you have?
Mr. Chair, thanks. And since Councilor Gonzalez brought up the election that happened last Tuesday, a week ago, we've done some private congratulations, but I'd like to specifically acknowledge and congratulate our colleagues who the voters endorsed enthusiastically. One for position of president. Congratulations, Councilor Gonzalez, and Councilor Lewis and Councilor Simpson for another 4 years of service and leadership and passion for the work we do. And the voters also, we should tip our hats to Auditor Evans, who was reelected by the voters as well. We've got work to do, and I am very much looking forward to doing it with you all.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you. Colleagues, I had forgotten that we didn't really report on Thursday. Councilor Rosenthal is right. The Glean exhibit, this might be our best gallery show yet of at least the past 8 years. Some really tremendous artists. But also on Wednesday of last week, I attended the Clackamas County Coordinating Committee Metro Subcommittee. I don't normally report on that wonderful table. And this week it feels important that I do because we had 2 presentations, one on the TriMet budgeting from John Sarah, and then one on the governor's prosperity brought to us by Kathy Heisey. I just bring that up because it feels like those would be logical presentations for us to welcome here at this table. So hopefully we can get on that circuit.
Sorry, what was the 2 again?
The Governor's Prosperity Council with Kathy Heisey, and then TriMet budgeting with John Sarah. And I also just bringing up Clackamas County Coordinating Committee, which I'm the lead on. Councilor Simpson, I believe, is still my alternate.
I am.
We're having retreat weekend after next. Day 1 will be on economic growth and prosperity, and day 2 will be on transit. I cannot stay for the whole thing. I will miss some of the transit fun if anybody wants to go in my place. I have attended every single one of these in the past. They are fun. This year they didn't ask me about dates and I need to be on the river. But let me know if you're interested in joining me for that retreat. It's the 5th, 6th, next Friday, Saturday. Thank you.
Okay, well, colleagues, if you'll bear with me, I have some prepared remarks. So today is one of the last council meetings I'll preside over as acting president. And it's also our last week of Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. I've always had pretty mixed feelings about this month. I think my exact quote when someone asked me was like, this month is such a misnomer. Not that we shouldn't be celebrating, the history and contributions and lives of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. But it's really because, if you think about it, the majority of humankind is Asian. So even when we narrow it to just this country, Asian American and Pacific Islander, such a big and wide-ranging diaspora. It's not a monolithic community. So lumping everyone together in 1 month is flattening. And this flattening happens a lot, often in damaging ways. Just last week we had a presentation with a bar graph that had just the Asian category. And like I mentioned, if you look at data in that category, Asians in the Portland region are doing well. But if you start to disaggregate, you see a very different picture. And, we'll look at, data between, Japanese Americans and Micronesian Americans during COVID, and how it was considered one one demographic, but the health disparities and outcomes were very different. So for reasons like that, I can't speak to the whole Asian American experience, but I can speak to my experience. So bear with me, but for folks that don't know, I grew up in a Chinese American household, but my parents were from Taiwan and moved to Michigan's Upper Peninsula, where we're one of the few Asians around. My parents did an incredible job of keeping those cultures alive for my sister and I. Every year we had 2 Christmases. We had Lunar New Year and Christmas. Once every few months, we'd all pile into our Ford Aerostar and drive 8 hours to Chicago, which was the closest my parents could go to stock up on Asian goods. So we'd go to Chinatown, we'd stop in Ding Hao, the name of a store, and we stuff our van with like noodles and sauces and stuff that would last us for 4 months. I also remember like back in the 80s, we would pack up a whole van. It'd be $200 for your whole van.
Different times.
Different times, and gas was $1. I went to public school and had a pretty good experience overall, but it started with a big surprise. In our home growing up, we spoke Chinese. So English is actually my second language, which I didn't actually realize until I showed up at preschool and figured out that no one could understand me. So my mom and I learned English together by watching Days of Our Lives, although she made me look away when things got a little too steamy. I think even though the specifics may be different, there are probably some universal experiences there that are familiar to anyone who grew up in an immigrant household. And another one that is probably sadly relatable to something my mom always told me when I was growing up, that you have to be twice as good as everyone else because you're not going to get the same opportunities and same shake. So I'm not a parent, but I imagine that is a very hard thing to have to tell your kid. And even though I was little, I felt the weight of that hope and expectation. So I'm the first, Taiwanese Chinese American to sit on the Metro Council, but I'm not the only elected official up here that has that first label. Being the first of something is a great honor, but there is also the same weight of expectation. So when you're the first, you're not just you and me as Duncan, but you're someone that represents community, that has maybe a job where you work in that community, and you carry a multitude of identities. But for people who have never seen someone from their community who looks like them sitting in a position of power, me being here has mattered to them, and they have high expectations of me. My first week in office here, my first constituent call was about the Chinese cemetery at Lone Fir. What was I going to do about that historical injustice that stretched back decades? And then folks asked me if I had solved homelessness yet in the first week. But here we are. So I have an answer to that second question, but I am very proud to say that construction has begun on the Block 14 memorial at Lone Fir. Really looking forward to have us all go visit in the next couple of months, especially when it opens. So many people have poured so much time, thought, and physical work into that project. And I'm a small part of it, but the community has done so much. So I'm proud to have gotten to use this position on the dais to move that forward, and so many other community priorities. But something I've learned while in council is that the title alone isn't enough to make things happen. These seats come with a platform and some power, but you have to really connect with people, win them over with ideas, and build those coalitions. So I'd like to think that I've done that as a councilor in my just brief couple months as acting council president. But let's see, it's had a bit of a "I told you so" moment for my parents. When I was in college, I experienced another stereotypical immigrant experience. My parents were not very happy that I decided to switch my major to political science instead of pre-med. And my mom was not very encouraging. Her exact words were, "We are not the Bushes, we are not the Kennedys, we can't help you with this, we can't even vote for you." So obviously politics has worked okay, even without the coveted Huang parental vote. But no, there's so much to do. And I think the biggest question, not just for this role or my time at Metro, but for my career is, how do we take that sense of wanting to see deeper, broader, lasting change and use that position to move it forward for the communities that we serve? So I'm wrapping up as council president. Really excited to hand it off finally to our next president. Yeah, I just want to close by wishing you all a happy API Heritage Month. This is the last week, whatever that means to you. And I want to thank all my fellow counselors and all the staff who supported me as I navigated the last few months.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. I love the drama. All right, well, thank you for that indulgence. Yeah, seeing no further discussion, the council meeting is adjourned.